We're starting with 2 parts in our bootcamp for today. The first part will be about how to ace your CV writing, and the second part will be how to ace your professional job interview. And this will be done by our Dr. Manisha Sudarshan. Dr. Manisha, she's a thoracic surgeon in the Department of Thoracic and Cardiothoracic Surgery at Cleveland Clinic, Ohio. She graduated, she had her medical degree from McGill and in Montreal, and she completed her general surgery residency in McGill as well. She as well had master's in public health from Harvard University, and she served her fellowship in the cardiothoracic surgery in Mayo Clinic, Rochester as well. Dr. Sudarshan, she had presented her research at national and international meetings. She co-authorized over 40 papers in leading medical journals. She has also authorized chapters in numerous surgical handbooks and reference works. In her spare time, she likes to enjoy running and reading topics. So we would like to welcome Dr. Sudarshan to start our first part in this session, which is how to ace your CV writings. Please, if you have any questions, to put them in the Q&A panel, so we will answer them at the end of this session. We will start the first part now with Dr. Manisha. So welcome, Dr. Manisha.
Thank you. Thank you for that generous introduction. And thank you to Dr. Asma Al-Rashid and the rest of the Young Scalpels Bootcamp Committee for extending this invitation. I'm thrilled to be here with you all to talk on this really important topic of CV writing and interview. And really, it's inspirational to see the setup for the bootcamp. It's just great work. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. So is that okay? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, for us.
Great. So once again, I'm Manisha Sudarshan. I work at the Cleveland Clinic as one of the general thoracic surgeons. I'm also the director of operation for thoracic surgery. I'm involved a lot in the thoracic surgery education and our cardiothoracic surgery education committee, both for cardiac and thoracic surgery. So I have a great interest in trainees and trainee education. And so this topic is very dear to my heart. So we'll start with CV writing. And I would like to start by the differences between a CV and a resume, and we'll focus on CVs for the rest of the talk. So a resume is generally more succinct. It's only 1 to 3 pages, and it's more about telling a story about the candidate. It lists objectives for a job and what the candidate can offer to that company or that institution. And most commonly is not used in the medical world. It's more used in industry and nonprofits. And a CV is what we're probably more used to in medicine. It's more about listing facts about the candidates. It's normally a bit longer. It could be shorter, but it could be longer than 3 pages. And it really starts heavily on focusing on education and degrees. And so for the rest of the talk, I will focus on CV. Just to once again point out the difference between a resume and a CV. This is what sometimes a resume may look like. So this is a 1-page resume that gives a profile of the candidate, that gives the general experience to start with, then the education, some references, but it's all in 1 page. Whereas in contrast, this is how a CV, especially a medical CV, would look like. Generally, there's no pictures. There's not much or any graphics. It's much more simpler, easy to read. It's mostly black and white, and it's clearly divided into subheadings that the person who's reviewing the resume can easily reference and find out exactly, according to chronological order, what this candidate was doing and when. So let's dive down a bit deeper into a curriculum vitae or CV. So a CV is the backbone of a medical career. You will need it for everything, for applying to internships, for applying to residencies, for fellowships, for staff positions or job positions. Even once you're in a job positions for promotions, updating your CV is very important for your annual professional review. But on top of all that, no matter when, where you are in your training or in your work life, you will always need a very good and robust CV for applying for research grants, for awards, for committees. So putting a lot of thought and work early into your CV and making sure you keep it updated will always be an advantage for your career advancement. So when should you start your CV? I know we have people in varied levels of training, and it's never too early to start your CV, but definitely by medical school, you should have started putting together your experience, your education into something that you can easily send to other people, because now you'll be thinking about internships and other opportunities. One thing is, once you do start it, keep it accessible. I find personally, it's not much use if you keep it on a desktop in your office or in your at your home, because then you're in some other place, you're not able to update it. You're not able to send it off quickly for that application you have been working on. So keep it accessible, as in keep it on a cloud where you can easily update it if there was a new publication, or if you were chosen for some award, you can quickly put it in so you don't forget. So that's just a personal advice there. Ensure when you're sending out the CV that's a PDF, not a Word document, just because Word documents, when opened on different laptops or Mac versus a PC, can change in formatting, and you don't want your CV to change or look sloppy in any way. So a PDF is more standardized. So just make sure you send it off as a PDF whenever you're giving it as an application or an email. And this is the most important part, which is regularly updated. I just put in there every 2 months, but that will really vary according to the individual and what activities are going on. So make sure you update all your activities. These are volunteer positions or paid positions or committees, any leadership. Make sure you update the dates, because there's nothing more sloppy than saying, well, you know, medical school from 2016 to present, and clearly it's the fact that you have graduated medical school. So make sure you keep those dates updated on your CV, and also keep updating names, because, for example, if you were on part of some committee and you were a committee member, but the head of that committee was somebody, you can't always keep those names on your CV. So when you're applying for positions, people can see who you worked with, and perhaps they know that person and they can reach out that person asking about you, but they may never have known that if that was not on your CV. So it's a good place to keep some names around who know you, and if you work with them closely on a project or something like that. And we'll go in deeper into that. So these are some general CV do's and don'ts. So do keep your CV very concise yet comprehensive. So you want to make sure this is your time to boast about yourself. So you want to make sure you put in all the activities that you've done, all the good things you have done, but at the same time, you still need to keep it concise. And I'll give you an example later on of what I mean about concise. Make sure you use easy to follow headings and dates. As I gave the example before, make sure you use bolding and underlining and italics for the reader to be able to follow. But that doesn't mean you need to use graphics or different fonts or colors, because generally that can start to seem a little unprofessional. But it's important to have clear headings so people can go find the information, what they're looking for about you. When you're elaborating on some activity, so let's say you were on a committee and you organized a talk, you can talk about what your responsibilities were. For example, if you were the head of that committee and you decided with who the speakers are going to be and what the program is going to be. But at the same time, even though you want to tell your reader about all the good things you've done, you don't want to drone on and on about it. So make sure you put it in bullet points that is no more than 1 or 2 liners. You want to pique their interest, and if they're really interested, they'll call you and can address this portion during an interview. And we already covered that you can use bolding and underlining to make sure it flows very easily and looks tight and well. Some CV don'ts: do not use too many graphics or fonts, experimentation. Sometimes while reviewing some CVs, I see a lot of cursive. It's difficult to read. It translates differently on a paper, and the reader just gets tired. This is very, very important. Doubly check for spelling and grammatical errors, because it comes off as not detail oriented and sloppy. And if your CV is sloppy, it sort of translates onto what kind of work you would be doing. Even though it might be very easy to miss, make sure you go through it between different times, have someone else read it over to make sure there's no silly spelling mistakes that have not been caught. Another don't is don't use paragraphs, because people get tired. They're probably reading several CVs, and yours just, if they have to go through paragraphs and paragraphs about all the things you've done, they just get tired, and they're just gonna start, quickly going through the pages rather than trying to understand what are all the good things that you have done. So stick to the bullet points and keep the verbose out of your CV. Make sure your events are not out of order. This can easily happen, and once again looks very sloppy. So make sure they either flow from the most recent to the oldest, or if you want, an oldest to the most recent, but whatever it is, the event should not be out of order. These are especially important during publications, because those can easily come out of order, and it just doesn't look good. Once again, we said do not keep dates outdated. This is very important. And this is a hard stop, which is exaggeration and fabrication of skills or activities. Appropriately write about what you did, but there's no point in fabricating or exaggerating anything on your CV, because rest assured it does come out, and people quickly pick that up. So stick with the facts and stick with what exactly was your responsibility, and don't go delving in those kinds of things. So some don'ts, especially, and these are examples from what I have seen before while reviewing CVs for different positions at my institution. So fonts and size, so this is a classic thing. So on my computer, it looks like an italics, but this is coming out as a normal Arial font. But what I wanted to show was an italics, which was very difficult to read, which happened recently. Another don't is the size. Oftentimes in some applications we say, well, CVs that are no more than 3 pages, because we simply cannot go through everything that are 10-page CVs. And what some people will do is just reduce the font down to 7, and that's not a solution. We really do want to see something that is more succinct, and don't put your old things, put more recent, but just don't reduce the font, because it's impossible to see, and then once again you quickly lose the interest of your reader. Typos, I saw this not too while ago. It was a little embarrassing, detail oriented, but not really. Lengthy descriptions. So this is what I was talking about before. So this is a person trying to describe their volunteer position on Meals on Wheels, and they're talking about their duties that included cooking meals, packing meals, and then sometimes they would deliver meals, and to what kind of needy and how they would deliver meals. Well, that's a little too much information, and it's not necessary. If the person wants to know more about that position, they'll just ask you in their interview. So you just want one bullet point with a 1-liner or 2-liner that succinctly summarizes what you did. And at the same time, still gives you credit for everything that you did, So let's talk about how to structure your CV. And these are pretty standard ways to structure a medical CV. Some of these headings you may not have as yet, since you're so early in your career, but something to keep in mind. So identification is first and foremost. You want to make sure your legal name, your address, your telephone number, your email, and languages you speak are there. You want the person, whoever's received your CV, to be able to contact you very easily if they are interested in going further with whatever you're applying for. Then it's pretty standard that comes your education. So when should you start? So that really depends on where you are in your career. If you're in medical school, I think it's appropriate to start at basically graduating high school. But if you're more towards the fellowship, maybe don't just stop at the high school and start from medical school. So that will change depending on how far you are in your career, but education is the next one. Then it's the professional certification. So anything from USMLE or a board certification or principles of surgery, which is a different type of certificate you get in your first 2 years of surgery. So anything that you think is an official certification, it could be ACLS, BCLS, but something that you have done that shows a certificate, you can put it up there. So you can show people, you know, I passed this course, I am certified in this. It shows you've followed through with something and you've gotten a good outcome. So present position, so that people know exactly what you're doing and where. Career history, this could once again change depending on how far ahead you are in your career. You might be applying for fellowship and you have done internship somewhere else, you've done residency somewhere else, and so you want to make sure everyone can understand your trajectory. Or if you're still in medical school, perhaps career history is not a heading that you might need on your CV, and you can eliminate that. Volunteer positions, this is more key in when you're applying for medical school or when you're applying for internships. And so once again, if you've done the work, make sure that you write about it and you tell people what you did so that they can learn what you took away from that experience. So don't leave this out. I found that as I progressed in my career and really after residency, it was very difficult in terms of time to have any volunteer positions. I took this out of my CV just not to make it, you know, too bulky. This is a very important line that sometimes we don't see in CV, so I really encourage you to think about management and leadership activities that you have done. And everyone has done some sort of leadership activity, whether it's being part of a committee, it's being president or vice president of a club at medical school, or organizing a talk, or organizing a charity event. If you've done it, make sure people know about it. And this is a very appropriate heading to put it under. It shows that you have leadership skills, it shows you're able to follow through, you're able to manage a team, you're a team player. And these are all important qualities we're looking for in trainees. So make sure you reflect on what sort of management and leadership activities you've done and put it down. Special honors, awards, and recognition. You know, we always want to know how well you've done things and if you've been rewarded for that. So make sure, and nothing is too small. You know, even if you were presenting at your local medical school and you won an award for a presentation there, put it down so that it tells, you know, that you're able to speak, you're able to give a good presentation. People like the way you talk, so put it down. But once again, it's very important to update your CV regularly, because sometimes we just forget. And if we forget it, we never make it on. So on top of that is presentations. This is very important, especially if you're going to apply for academic institutions. So keep a track of presentations that you do. Most importantly, it is the scientific meetings. You cannot miss those. If you presented on those, put it down there. But if you're still early in your career, you have not presented at scientific meetings, no worries. You must have done some presentations for something, whether it's your teaching, it's your teaching day, if it's your local community, or you did a presentation for patients, something. You put it down there. And then you can give details on what the presentation was and where it was. Once again, one-liners. If people want to know more about it, they'll ask you in your interview. Publications become a huge deal, especially as you're applying for fellowships and staff or job positions. So keep a track of your publications. And once you start getting publications and you have numerous, you need to divide them into 3 categories, which is accepted, in press, and published. So people can easily see it. What you don't want to do is put everything in published, because people are checking up and they might put your name in PubMed and things don't come up. And then it creates confusion as to whether it was truly published or not. So then, you have to justify, well, it's in press, that's why it's not coming up in PubMed yet, or it's just accepted, it's not, So you want to make sure you keep things clear, so you keep things honest and accurate on your CV for whoever's reviewing it, who might cross-check all these things. Then another one for book chapters. Sometimes your mentors will ask you to be co-authors in book chapters. This is a great opportunity to show that you know your field, that you know this topic well, and make sure it's in your CV. Teaching activities. Medicine is such a collaborative sport, and even if you're an intern, you're teaching the medical students. If you're a resident, you're teaching the interns and the medical students. As you go higher, you're teaching more and more. And teaching becomes a really important part of your training. Even if you're going to practice in a community hospital later on with no residents, you cannot avoid teaching in your career. So put down your teaching activities, whether you talked to the medical students or to the interns, you gave a talk, or you were, taught them sutures at a simulation, or anything that you can think of, put it down in your teaching activities, because people want to know how well you do with others and how well you impart your knowledge. Other media. So I wanted to cover this specifically, and this is coming up more and more now, because we're getting more comfortable using Twitter and Instagram, and I mean this bootcamp is completely an example of that. And often we do so much stuff on the other media, and yet it may not translate into our CV because it's not traditional media. And now more and more people are acknowledging that if you do things like podcasts, if you do blog articles or online articles, they may not come under publications because they're not peer-reviewed publications, but you should still talk about that and you should still get some credit for that. The other one is a tweet chat moderation. There's a lot of tweet chats, especially in North America, where people can get together in an hour and talk about a topic with a hashtag. And if you were a moderator for something like that, something innovative like that, which can take a lot of effort and time on your part, make sure you put it in there, because that shows you're savvy, that you get people together, you're able to coordinate a lot of things. If you did videos, and that could be something like a patient promotional video, or you did a video to, for medical students, or anything. If you did any sort of media, reflect on it and think about whether it can be appropriately translated to something on your CV to show people that you're comfortable using media to further your own education, further other education, and just further clinical medicine in general. So. And there might be other things that fall into other media that I may not have necessarily put into that subheading. And this is something that it's nice to put at the end of CVs. You don't have to dwell on top of it, but personal interest, especially when you're applying for residency, it's kind of nice to see, well, they did all this other stuff. What are they like for, like, people? What do they do in their spare time? And it's great because sometimes people have these very interesting personal interests that we would like to know more about, that we can talk about in the interview, to know this person more as a resident, as a future trainee, but also as a person, because we spend so much time with each other in the clinical environment. And this is more as you progress in your career. If you have dealings with the industry, if you have patents, if you have any conflicts of interest, you want to put that in the CV. But I think this would apply more for if you're more further down in your career, less so in the medical students trainee phase. So just overall tips, I found that when I was early on, I used the Career Center at the university. So as mentioned before, I was at McGill, and they had a lot of support, people who could look over the CV, who could give you resources, templates, and things like that. There's a lot of online CV advice from medical societies as well. I'm sure even the boot camp itself has great questions to reflect on. And so similarly, you can seek out free things from other medical societies. Some of the things that come into mind for me is American Association of Physicians. And then this is important. You can work on your CV a lot, and it looks perfect to you. But have someone who's been there, a mentor who could quickly look at your CV and give you a critical review, not just a hand wave, but really critically. Okay, I don't understand this. This seems too boastful. This does not seem boastful enough, and that can be really that can be very valuable. So identify that someone and have them look over it. It could be more than one person, because once you do it, then you have this great template of a CV set up, and then you can continue to update it for the rest of your career. And so that puts me to my last point, which is keep updating your CV. There's nothing more embarrassing than a expired CV, expired things on your CV when you're sending it off, and that just does not reflect well. Well, I'm open for any questions from that part of the talk.
Just 1 second. Yeah. So I didn't actually, I don't know if my camera's on again. Yeah, so I didn't actually see any of the questions that were uploaded. Okay, but I would like to ask you a question, Dr. Manisha. So as we are in the surgical field, and we do like multiple.
Still off.
Sorry?
Your camera is off.
Still off? I actually started it. Okay. I'm not showing?
No.
No, until now. Okay. I thought I fixed it.
Okay, let's just proceed with the question.
Yeah. So sorry. So my question is, as we're in the surgical field, and how often we do surgeries, and so how can we summarize them in the CV? We cannot write each surgery that we did it, for example, but how can we refer it as, like, can we refer to a logbook, or do we mention like the major surgeries in the CV? How can we do this since we are in the surgical field?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so when I finished my training at Mayo and I was applying for jobs, definitely one of the questions is, well, how much have you operated? What have you done? What you're comfortable with? I never actually put that on my CV. And we have a log, and I was never actually asked for the log. But one of the questions that comes up during interviews is, tell me about this operation, or tell me about that operation. So that's how people sort of got an idea about how comfortable you are doing things. I think that if someone always asks you for a log, you must keep a log. First and foremost, you must keep a log of all your cases throughout residency, internship, and even when you're a staff surgeon. So firstly, that's very important. Number two, we are automatically sort of forced to keep a log, because in training you need to document your cases in order to be eligible to take the boards. So that's sort of automatically done for you in training. I mean, you have to do it through an automatic software. But in case the training program where you are, or the country where you are does not automatically have that software set up for you, then it's so easy just to use Excel spreadsheet. So you have to be very meticulous about making sure you have your log there. And then it's very easy when people ask you, well, how many cases you have done, to just simply print that out, make sure to remove the patient's name and clinic number, and make sure it's completely anonymous. but you're able to, even if it's in Excel, and if you know how to set it up well, you can even give a graphical display of how many cases you did within, each type of specialty. So if you're in thoracic, how many esophagectomies, how many lobectomies, and things like that. So I think that's a great point you make about keeping a very close track about what you do, and being organized enough that you can quickly print out a summary of everything that you've done surgically.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We have two questions. Abir, she asked if we should attach certificates.
Not really. When we're looking for trainee spots, whether it's intern or residencies or fellowship, it is automatically part of the application for the certificates. And often the certificates are needed directly from the medical school in certain respects. So for the CV part, no, you don't need to attach certificates, especially if you're just emailing somebody for, piquing their interest about you, because it becomes too bulky. I think they use the professional certification subheading to say what you have done. And in case somebody asks you for proof, then you can, attach the certificate, but you don't need to attach the certificate from the beginning.
Yeah, thank you very much. One more question from Miriam. She said, as now the hospitals are not allowing students to shadow, so I can add it in my CV. What are the alternatives events that I can add in my CV due to the COVID dilemma?
What do you mean alter?
I think what she's meaning, if Miriam can chat, correct me if I'm wrong, since now, like many of the surgical, I don't know, like for example for Kuwait, like some of the operations were stopped, so nothing to add in the CV. So what do we do in this area? Do we mention that we help the medicals or the ICU,
right,
for example?
I mean, I think you have to make the best of the situation. Whatever you did, even if it's virtual, you did put in the time. So if there was anything virtual you participated on. So for example, during the time that we were shut down to medical students, we still continue to have online education, and medical students logged into our thoracic education and put in the time, put in the effort to study and interact with us. So that's something that you could, put on your CV if that happened to you. Well, I couldn't go shadow and I couldn't be in the operating room, but this was the alternative suggested, and I did go ahead and attend that. And something like this is a classic example. This Young Scalpels Bootcamp, it is a virtual event, and if you're attending it, put it down. If it's at the cost of other in-person activities.
Thank you. There's one more question. Does residency goes under education or career?
No, residency goes under education. If it is an ACGME, you can put residency under, because residency leads up to a board certification, no matter where you are. So I put it under education.
Okay. Should we put special honors awards that are not medical related, but are related to our interests?
No. I think keep it in your interests. So one example is if you are a marathon runner and you have won awards or completed marathons, don't put it there. Put it under hobbies. And once again, don't make it bulky. Just a little bracket saying black belt if you're karate is enough. And then they'll ask you further,
If I have a if I have surgical skills, but not certified yet, how can I mention it on my CV?
So if you have surgical skills, but you're not certified yet, it is hard to mention that on a CV because you don't have any backup. You don't have anything to show for it. I mean, if you're in medical school or you're in internship, if you know how to sew, that's great. But no, if you're not, board certified, no one's going to talk or pay much due to that. I think that's something you can bring up in your interviews. That's a perfect way. Or, for example, if you want to show them you're able to do laparoscopy, but you're not laparoscopic certified yet, you can, if you did a shadow or a rotation, put it under there, got a lot of experience, received experience in laparoscopy, did 14 laparoscopic appendectomies or something like that. But at the same time, you can't really claim to know laparoscopy because you really don't, unless you have something to back it up with. So I think be careful when you're talking about that. You can say you got a lot of experience and put it under the subheading of where you got it, but and that should pique interest. And when you're interviewing, you can talk more about that.
Okay, one more question. How do I write in CV that I'm shadowing a doctor?
You can put it under experience. Or shadow can actually fall under volunteer work. That's more appropriate under volunteer.
Okay. I think we can take 2 more questions. What are the current surgical shadowing observing opportunities that are open in international students in the US? No. Let's ask about another question. Which subheading do I put a surgical elective under?
That would be under experience. So the work experience can change according to what you want. So if you're applying for a surgical residency, you can put it under experience. If you're applying truly for a residency, your application will be such that automatically they will pull out your rotations, and your shadowing will not be pulled out because that's not really something that's that's in the medical school curriculum, so that's more volunteer. But if you want, you can always put the surgical rotations under work experience.
Okay.
So highlight.
Yeah. Last question, gonna take before the second session. Is it important to put details of clinicians we worked with in the CV?
So to some extent, yes. For example, if you worked with, if I'm just giving an example, where if you're applying to North America, you're applying to Canada, for example, and you went to shadow another Canadian surgeon there. And you want to make sure that when you apply to Canada, they know that you shadowed this person because they probably know this person. So they can reach out and, talk about you and how your experience was. But at the same time, you don't want to put in too much details. If you shadow just for 2 weeks with a surgeon that clearly they won't know just because of geographic restrictions, then don't cluster your CV, because if they want to get to know you through that person, they'll ask for the person. In addition, whatever application you send, you're going to need reference letters, you're going to need referees and their names, numbers. So you don't want to clutter your CV with that when you have a totally different part of the application that will address that.